Morbid Facts. In September of 2008, Blink-182 drummer Travis Barker survived a plane crash that killed 4 out of the 6 people on board. He suffered third-degree burns over 65% of his body and underwent 16 surgeries over an 11-week span. Travis was in so much pain that he repeatedly called friends and offered them over $1 million to help him end his own life. A prion disease called Kuru can be contracted when a human consumes another human's brain. It was typically found in cannibals from New Guinea who would consume the brains of their dead relatives as part of a funerary ritual. The fatal disease would slowly form holes in the victims' brains and cause them to laugh uncontrollably. In 2016, a Texas father drove home and went to sleep, forgetting that his 6-month-old daughter was still strapped to her car seat. Hours later, he found her unresponsive in the blistering hot car. Before attempting CPR and calling 911, he brought her inside and placed her in the refrigerator to try and revive her. But the child had likely died hours earlier, and the man was charged with manslaughter. During the 1980s, Rebecca Schaeffer was the star of the popular CBS sitcom My Sister Sam. But in 1989, she was fatally shot in the doorway of her West Hollywood apartment by an obsessed fan who had been stalking her for over 3 years. The 21-year-old's death led to the passing of some of the first anti-stalking laws in America. This devastating photo was taken by Tom Stoddard during the Sudanese famine in 1998. It shows a well-nourished Sudanese man stealing a bag of corn from a starving child after it was given to him by a charity. Here's a photo of the unidentified victims of John Wayne Gacy being laid to rest at a mass funeral. In 2006, 18-year-old Ryan Waller was shot in the face during a Phoenix home invasion. His girlfriend was killed, but Ryan somehow survived. However, police mistakenly treated Ryan as a suspect, not a victim. Despite a severe bullet wound in his head, Ryan was interrogated for hours and denied medical treatment. He eventually passed away as a result of the horrific negligence. In 2019, Salman Mirza and his ex wanted to hook up, but they didn't have a condom, so they decided to use epoxy glue to seal it instead. His friends later found him unconscious and drove him to the hospital, where he died of multiple organ failures due to the faux condom. In 1982, an Arizona man named David Grundman died while shooting a 26-foot-tall saguaro cactus to try and knock it down. But a 500-pound arm of the cactus fell on him, crushing him to death. In 2001, a man from Utah had been driving a van full of friends on a mountain when his brakes suddenly failed. But rather than trying to save them, he tried to save himself by jumping out of the car to his death, while all of his friends ended up surviving. In 2001, a Florida man was shot dead while testing out a bulletproof potion that he received from a witch doctor. After applying the potion for 2 weeks, he asked a friend to shoot him so that he could finally test it out. Turns out the potion was just cherry Kool-Aid, and the man died instantly. These are the hands of Japanese serial killer Tsutomu Miyazaki. He was born with a rare birth defect that caused his hand joints to be fused together, preventing him from being able to bend his wrists upwards. 2 Mice Eating Cheese is the name of London's smallest statue, which commemorates 2 construction workers who died in 1862. They were scuffling over a missing sandwich that resulted in both of them falling off the scaffolding. Turns out it was just stolen by mice. The movie Jaws directly contributed to a surge in shark hunting and a massive drop in shark populations. Author Peter Benchley deeply regretted writing Jaws, saying, "Knowing what I know now, I could never write that book today. Sharks don't target human beings, and they certainly don't hold grudges." Today, sharks kill only around 10 humans per year, but humans kill around 11,000 sharks every hour. A 34-year-old man with ALS completely lost the ability to move anything, including his eyes. When a brain chip finally allowed him to communicate again, the first thing he said was, "I need a beer." This photo of Sean and Michael McQuilkin was taken at Sequoia National Park just seconds before they were struck by lightning in 1975. All 3, including their photographer's sister, survived the strike, but younger brother Sean suffered third-degree burns and spent 6 months in a coma. After being unable to overcome the physical and mental toll of the incident, Sean sadly ended up taking his own life in 1989. In this photo, Japanese student Ayano Tokamasu can be seen gazing at Niagara Falls while standing on the fence. But just moments later, she lost her footing and tragically fell to her death. In 2016, a Chinese man named Jia was trying to take some selfies with a walrus at a zoo in China. But after a few picks, the massive walrus unexpectedly attacked Gia, clamping its jaws onto him and playfully dragging him into its pool. In a heroic attempt to save Gia, an experienced zookeeper tried to intervene, but both were tragically killed by the beast. Here's a 2021 photo of Alec Baldwin breaking down in tears after firing a prop gun that killed the director of photography on the movie set of Rust. The tragic incident happened as a result of catastrophic failures in safety procedures on the set. The woman who was responsible for checking the firearms was only 24 years old and had very little experience in her role. Rust was her second film as lead armorer, since she had previously worked on another Western film called The Old Way, where she received multiple safety complaints from the cast and crew. She also admitted on a podcast that she felt overwhelmed and underprepared for her job on Rust. The live round that killed Helena Hutchins and injured Joel Souza was not supposed to be on the set at all. The production had a very strict rule that banned any live ammunition on the premises, and only blanks or dummy rounds could be used. But it was later revealed that some of the crew members used the same guns for target practice with live rounds during their off hours, and had failed to properly clean and inspect the weapons before returning them to the armory. These are some of the craziest torture devices in history that were actually used. The Scold's Bridle was a device used to publicly humiliate women until the 19th century. On the inside, the device had a metal plate that would press down on the tongue and prevent the wearer from speaking. It was placed on women who were said to be difficult to keep them quiet and prevent them from gossiping. These punishing shoes were a type of medieval torture device. The victim would have to stand on their tippy toes for as long as they could, before falling back and having rusty spikes jammed into their heel. Rat torture was another medieval method that involved putting a bunch of rats into a cage that was strapped to the victim's stomach. The top of the cage was then slowly heated, forcing the rats to burrow through the victim's body to escape the heat. During the Middle Ages, there was a form of torture where the victim's feet were covered in salt and a goat would start licking them. Known as tickle torture, it would become extremely painful once the skin was worn away by the rough tongue of the goat, creating a wound with salt slowly trickling in. In the case that Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were left stranded on the moon, NASA planned on cutting off communication with them. They didn't want to record how the men chose to die. There's typically an IQ minimum of 80 points to serve in the US military. But to meet the manpower requirements of the Vietnam War, the US Army loosened up on this policy and began recruiting soldiers with mental disabilities. These men were known as McNamara's morons and died at 5 times the rate of other Americans in the war. This is also what the character Forrest Gump was based on. A suicide bomber in Afghanistan was thwarted by a stray dog which barked and snarled at the man, causing him to prematurely detonate at the entrance. The dog was then flown to the United States and appeared on Oprah before being adopted. But tragically, she ran away from home and was captured by an animal shelter which ended up euthanizing her by mistake. In 1943, Polish ballerina Francesca Mann arrived at Auschwitz. When ordered to take off her clothes, she did so provocatively to divert the attention of the guards. While the roll call officer was distracted, she grabbed his gun and shot the man in the head. She then managed to wound another guard before other prisoners joined her rebellion until they were all shot dead, leaving them to either run out of oxygen or take their own lives with no further earthly contact. FDNY Ladder 3 was one of the first units to show up at the World Trade Center on 9/11. Its crew of 11 men sadly perished in the collapse of the North Tower, and now their truck is on display in the 9/11 Museum. In April of 2015, 28-year-old Shayna Sims gained access to a funeral home in Tulsa, Oklahoma. She pretended to be a makeup artist to access the body of Tabitha Lynch. Apparently, Shayna resented Lynch and suspected that her husband had been having an affair with her. So as payback, Sims decided to mutilate Lynch's body, cutting up her face and removing multiple organs and chunks of her hair. Court sentenced her to 16 years in prison for unlawfully removing a body part from a corpse. In 2010, the teenage daughter of Michelle Kalina came across something horrifying in her mother's closet: the decomposed remains of 5 babies. Over the course of 14 years, Michelle gave birth to at least 5 children, ending their lives immediately after they were born. She was sentenced to between 20 and 40 years in prison. When Frank Zappa was a child, he always played with the mercury that his chemist father brought home from work, often covering his entire bedroom floor with the element. But childhood exposure to mercury is now known to cause prostate cancer as an adult. which Zappa would end up dying from at the age of 52. In 1978, over 2,000 students from Pennsylvania tried to set the world record for the largest game of tug-of-war. But instead, the 2,000-foot rope snapped, releasing several thousand pounds of stored energy. Nearly 200 students were wounded, 5 had their fingertips severed, and hundreds more received second-degree burns. This photo taken last month shows 7-year-old Arthur Bittencourt giving a thumbs up while playing in a pile of poisonous limestone powder in Brazil. Just minutes later, Arthur was tragically fighting for his life after accidentally inhaling particles of the toxic substance. He was quickly rushed to the hospital and pronounced dead on arrival. In 2022, Ukrainian woman Irina Filkina had her photo taken after getting a manicure for Valentine's Day. A few weeks later, she was killed by a tank while pushing her bicycle in the town of Bucha, and her body was identified by her manicure. This was the chilling moment when a laser pointer was shown on Elijah Clayton during a Madden tournament at a Florida mall in 2018. The shooter had lost a game and refused to shake his opponent's hand before leaving the tournament. He later returned with a handgun and fired into the crowd. In 1999, Anna Bogelholm was skiing in Sweden when she suddenly fell through a frozen stream. She was stuck in the ice for 80 minutes until a rescue team was finally able to free her. When Anna was pulled out, she was given CPR and a defibrillator, but the emergency team was certain that she was dead. Anna arrived at the hospital nearly 2 hours later, by which point her body temperature was 56 degrees Fahrenheit. She was connected to an EKG, which showed no signs of life, and she was clinically declared dead. But doctors weren't giving up, as more than 100 medical workers worked in 9-hour shifts to try and revive her. Miraculously, they were able to warm up her blood and achieve a heartbeat, and then proceeded to put her on a ventilator for the next 35 days. Anna eventually woke up paralyzed from the neck down, and was initially angry at her friends for saving her life. But within the next few years, she somehow made a full recovery, and now works as a radiologist at the same hospital that saved her life. He killed 2 people, including Clayton, and injured 10 more. This photo taken in 2004 shows Deborah Garlick enjoying the island paradise of Phi Phi in Thailand. But soon afterwards, a massive tsunami struck the area, killing around 230,000 people in total. This was the last photo taken on Deborah's camera before she was tragically swept away by the wave. This peaceful photo of the New York City skyline was taken from the Manhattan Bridge around 8:30 a.m. on September 11, 2001. Just 16 minutes later, a plane would crash into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Here's a pic of volcanologist David A. Johnston 13 hours before he was killed by the eruption of Mount St. Helens in 1980. He was the first to report the eruption from an observation post 6 miles away, transmitting the message, "Vancouver, Vancouver, this is it," just before he was swept away by a lateral blast traveling at near supersonic speed. He had spent the last several months of his life studying the volcano, and his alert likely saved thousands of lives. In 2018, Kaylee Mudhart ripped out her own eyeballs and smashed them with her hands during a meth-induced psychotic episode. Kaylee had been awake for almost 48 hours straight, snorting and injecting a concoction of tainted methamphetamine which caused horrific hallucinations. These photos were taken at the wedding of Heather and David Mosher at a Connecticut chapel in 2017. Heather was battling advanced breast cancer but found the strength to marry the love of her life just 18 hours before passing away. In 1975, 197 passengers on a Japan Airlines flight became sick after eating food contaminated with staph bacteria. 144 of them were so ill that they required hospitalization, while 30 of them ended up in critical condition. Turns out one of the cooks who prepared the food had infected lesions on one of his hands. Keanu Reeves' sister Kim was diagnosed with the deadly blood cancer leukemia in 1991. In response, he sold his home to move closer to her, cleaned her house, cooked her meals, and provided all of her necessary medications. Once she recovered, Keanu started a private charity to fund cancer research in children's hospitals. In 2009, he was interviewed saying, "I don't like to attach my name to it, I just let the foundation do what it does." Frank Sinatra died the night of Seinfeld's finale, and his ambulance made it to the hospital in record time since there was no traffic due to everyone watching the show. Hans Scharf, the most successful Nazi interrogator in World War II, never physically harmed an enemy soldier. Instead, he treated them with respect and kindness, taking them for walks, letting them visit their captured comrades in the hospital, and even letting captured pilots go on test flights. His methods were very successful since virtually everyone ended up talking. The photo on the right shows a Houston police officer reacting outside the home where Andrea Yates drowned her 5 children in 2001. She started by holding 3 of her boys underwater in her bathtub until they stopped struggling. She then drowned her 6-month-old Mary, whom she left floating in the tub. Her last living child, Noah, soon walked in and asked what was wrong with Mary, then ran when he realized what was going on. But Yates quickly caught up to the 7-year-old and drowned him as well. Afterwards, she laid the lifeless bodies of her children together in her bed. She then called the police, repeatedly saying she needed an officer but refusing to say why. During the trial, the defense argued that Yates was severely mentally ill and not in control of her actions during the murders. She was in a deeply delusional state, believing she needed to murder her children to prevent them from going to hell. In 2006, she was found not guilty by reason of insanity and committed to a high-security mental hospital in Texas where she remains to this day. Jeanette McCurdy has described the relationship she had with her mother Deborah as both emotionally and sexually abusive. When Jeanette was 3 years old, her mother was diagnosed with breast cancer and underwent multiple surgeries and transplants. As a result, Deborah would perform routine vaginal and breast exams on Jeanette and never allowed her to shower alone until she turned 17. Living in poverty, her mother forced Jeanette into acting when she was 6 years old to financially support the family, and because Deborah had always wanted to become famous herself. McCurdy says that her mother was obsessed with making her a star and introduced Jeanette to a calorie restriction once she turned 11, leading to various eating disorders that Jeanette still struggles with, including anorexia and bulimia. McCurdy says that she refused to appear in the revival series of iCarly only because she didn't want to be reminded of her mother's abuse during the original show. Just last year, Jeanette released a book with the title I'm Glad My Mom Died 9 years after she passed away from breast cancer. In 2003, a woman found a painting in the trash on a New York City curb. She felt it had power, so she took it home without knowing anything about its value or origin. After holding on to it for 4 years, she eventually discovered that it was a very valuable Mexican painting that was stolen in 1987. So she contacted authorities and received a $15,000 reward plus a percentage of its sale price of over $1 million. In August of 2010, a 13-year-old British teenager was struck by lightning at 1313 on Friday the 13th. He was the only one struck amongst a crowd of 150,000 people who were watching an air show. In 2014, a 39-year-old Brazilian woman named Adriana wanted to find her mother who abandoned her as a baby. So she went on a TV show and ended up finding her mom through the power of the internet. The two had an emotional reunion, but her mother revealed that she had also abandoned Adriana's infant brother, Leandro. In a bizarre twist, Adriana's husband turned out to be her brother, Leandro. But despite the pair being siblings, they vowed to never separate. Actress Brittany Murphy and her husband both mysteriously passed away from pneumonia and severe anemia in their home only 5 months apart. Murphy's mom believes both of them were victims of toxic mold. Jonah Hill had to be hospitalized while filming The Wolf of Wall Street after snorting too much fake cocaine. In 2021, an 82-year-old man from Austria had the wrong leg amputated during surgery. The man was told he would still need his other leg amputated as well. The hospital said the incident occurred as a result of a sequence of unfortunate circumstances. Here's a devastating photo of a Colorado police officer distracting a little girl after her dad lost his life in a car accident. Judy Melanik is a medical examiner who identified hundreds of bodies after the 9/11 attacks, most of which were just scraps of flesh or pieces of limbs. She was called in August of 2002 because someone had found a foot bone on top of a skyscraper a quarter-mile away from ground zero. In 1998, Dana Carvey underwent open heart surgery to clear a blocked artery, but the surgeon operated on the wrong blood vessel. After spending 6 months recovering from the life-threatening botch, he won a $7.5 million lawsuit against the hospital and donated all of it to charity. In 2015, an Italian grandma accidentally sent 2 adults and 3 children to the hospital after making them hot cocoa that had expired in 1990. In 2013, a collection of files revealed that the US government lobotomized over 2,000 veterans against their will after World War II. They were lobotomized for reasons such as PTSD, depression, schizophrenia, and homosexuality. In 2018, 16-year-old Kevin Watkins was lagging horribly while attempting to play Xbox in his Georgia family's home. In an effort to improve the speed, he decided to change the Wi-Fi password to prevent others from using it and slowing down the connection while he was gaming. Soon enough, an argument broke out between Kevin and his mom, escalating to a point where his older sister Alexis had to step in to prevent Kevin from physically harming their mother. Tragically, Kevin placed Alexis in a strong chokehold and refused to let go despite his younger brother and mother begging for him to stop. By the time police arrived 15 minutes later, Alexis was no longer moving or responsive, but Kevin still had her in a chokehold. She had been starved of oxygen for a lengthy amount of time, resulting in extreme brain damage. Alexis was quickly rushed to the hospital, but was soon pronounced dead from asphyxiation. Kevin was tried for murder and sentenced to life in prison for the tragic incident. This was the final photo taken of James Gandolfini the night the 51-year-old actor suffered a massive heart attack in his hotel room in Rome, Italy. Hours before his sudden death, he scarfed down a double order of fried king prawns and a huge pile of foie gras, washed down with 2 pina coladas, 4 shots of rum, and a few beers. It would end up being his final meal. This 1998 photo was taken in Omagh, Ireland, just minutes before a bomb placed in the red car exploded. 29 people were killed by the blast and another 220 were injured. The cameraman of this photo died, but the man and his daughter happened to survive. This security photo shows teacher Dave Sanders guiding students out of the cafeteria during the Columbine High School massacre of 1999. After hearing gunshots from outside the school, Sanders sounded the alarm and saved over 100 students by herding them away from the shooters. Sadly, he was later shot 3 times and ended up being the only teacher killed in the shooting. Christopher Lee, the actor who played Saruman in The Lord of the Rings and Count Dooku in Star Wars, was related to Confederate General Robert E. Lee, was a flight lieutenant in the British Royal Air Force and killed multiple Nazis, climbed Mount Vesuvius 3 days before it erupted, tripped over a live bomb and survived, and released a death metal album at the age of 88. During World War II, French weightlifter Charles Rigolo was jailed after punching a Nazi guard. He then broke out of the cell by bending the bars, allowed other prisoners to escape with him, and then beat the guard who jailed him. Lachman Gurung was a Gurkha soldier during World War II who once threw back 2 enemy grenades from his trench before the third one exploded in his hand. He then single-handedly defended his post for over 4 hours against 200 Japanese enemies, killing 31 soldiers using only his left hand. He ended up surviving and was awarded the Victoria Cross for his actions, the highest and rarest honor in the British Army. In May of 2020, Yukon student Peter Manfredonia was having issues with his motorcycle. When 2 elderly gentlemen approached to help him, Peter pulled out a samurai sword and murdered one man while seriously injuring the other. He then circled around them multiple times with his bike before stealing another man's pickup truck and fleeing to his hometown. That's when he murdered his childhood friend and kidnapped the victim's girlfriend before driving south. Once he reached New Jersey, he fled the car alone and started walking on foot. Manfredonia's actions quickly sparked a massive manhunt that spanned multiple states and garnered national attention. However, it became increasingly difficult to locate the killer since this was during the peak of the pandemic, allowing him to easily conceal his face with a mask. After a week-long search, Peter was finally apprehended in Maryland. He was later diagnosed with multiple mental illnesses that caused him to suddenly snap. He received a 55-year prison sentence for his crimes and then apparently gained 200 pounds while in prison. It may sound like something straight out of Jurassic Park, but this is all 100% real. Extinct animals that scientists are bringing back. The science of cloning and de-extinction has been possible for decades, but there hasn't been the funding or motivation for it until now. A company called Colossal Biosciences has put together a team of scientists specialized in the field of de-extinction. And the first animal species they plan on reviving is the woolly mammoth. They'll be implanting embryos into Asian elephants using artificial wombs, existing mammoth DNA, and CRISPR technology. The company hopes that reintroducing these animals to the tundras will help make the Arctic colder by packing down the snow and slowing down the melting of the permafrost. They plan on starting with 100 woolly mammoths in a Siberian area called Pleistocene Park, and are hoping that millions of mammoths will end up taking back the Arctic within the next few decades. Colossal is striving to birth the first one by the end of 2024, and the company plans on completing its project by 2027. Benjamin, the last Tasmanian tiger, died in 1936 after being locked outside of its sleeping quarters and freezing to death at the Hobart Zoo. Ever since the species went extinct, an overabundance of their disease-carrying prey has run rampant because its primary predator disappeared, making the thylacine a strong candidate to become one of the first species to de-extinct through cloning. The quagga is a subspecies of the plain zebra that went extinct in 1883 due to excessive hunting. But the Quagga Project seeks to use selective breeding to bring these animals back, with the hope that their reintroduction will eradicate some of the invasive trees throughout South Africa. The dodo bird evolved without any natural predators, but humans eventually took advantage of this and killed them all for food. But in 2007, scientists came across the best preserved dodo sample ever found, which may make it possible to bring them back through the help of their closest living relative, the Nicobar pigeon. In 2019, Cambridge University student Alana Cutlin tragically jumped from her airplane while returning home from Madagascar. She reportedly appeared normal while boarding the plane, but just 10 minutes after takeoff, she suddenly unbuckled herself before opening the door of the aircraft and jumping out without hesitation, falling nearly a mile to her death. Her family later stated that she'd experienced panic attacks in the past, and that she might have been suffering from a bad reaction to prescription medication. In 2012, 88-year-old Ilda Maciel died in the hospital after her nurses made a critical error while attempting to feed her. They accidentally injected chicken soup into her veins rather than into her feeding tube. In 2012, 23-year-old gaming addict Chen Rongyu died of a heart attack while playing League of Legends for 23 hours straight in a Taiwanese cafe. It took staff hours to realize he was dead since he fell back in his chair and his arms were still stretched out toward his mouse and keyboard. At Belmont Park in 1923, a young jockey named Frank Hayes suffered a heart attack and died in the middle of a horse race. His body, however, remained on the saddle throughout the race, and his horse ended up winning, beating the odds of 20-1. Therefore, this was the first time that Hayes had ever won a race, and the last. Just last year, actor Anthony Starr received a 12-month prison sentence after being involved in a bar fight in Spain. According to reports, he drunkenly assaulted a chef by punching him in the face and smashing a bottle over his head. Starr then allegedly told the man, "You've committed the mistake of your life and I'm going to look for you. I want to kill you." The victim received 4 stitches in the hospital, and Starr managed to avoid jail time by paying him $4,000 in compensation. Bears in Russia sometimes get so desperate for food in the summer that they've been known to rip apart cemeteries and feast on the corpses of the recently deceased. In 1967, Prime Minister of Australia Harold Holt mysteriously disappeared while swimming in Queensland. He was presumed dead the next day and his body was never found. Former football star Brian Banks spent 6 years in prison until his alleged rape victim admitted that it never happened. This was the emotional moment when his innocence was proven and he was exonerated. When Theo Von was born in 1980, his dad Roland was 70 years old. Theo says he was always afraid to develop a relationship with Roland because he knew his dad would die when he was at a young age. His father ended up dying in an accidental shooting accident when Theo was 16 years old. British man Andrew Haigh was sentenced to life in prison earlier this year after beating his 50-year-old neighbor to death with a bag of Pokemon cards. The two had gotten into an argument after Haigh's neighbor accused him of being a pedophile. In 2012, Texas nurse Kimberly Sains was sentenced to life in prison after killing 5 of her patients by injecting bleach into their dialysis lines. Here are some of the distress calls that were painted onto houses during Hurricane Katrina in 2005. Many refused to evacuate their homes because they weren't allowed to bring any pets into sheltering areas. The Category 5 hurricane ended up taking the lives of around 1,400 people and 500,000 pets.